Everyone trickling in. Welcome. My name is Ashley. I'm here from Defendify. My name is Ashley McCurry. I'm the community manager here at Defendify. I'll give everyone another 10 seconds to trickle in, get familiar with the platform. On your right is a chat, and I'll be helping to manage the chat, and we'll share some handouts there by the end of the webinar here.
Ashley, what do you think of the heat wave? How you feeling?
I'm in Maine and it's very warm, but hopefully my hair will stay straight for the next 60 minutes and I won't melt or catch on fire. But us Mainers are not used to heat. So I think it's 92 degrees and we're melting. But I'm sure people from attending in the audience here might have different experiences. So everyone circled in. We have almost 70 people joining us so far. I'm so excited. Thank you for joining us today. We are so excited to join you all virtually for a conversation about how to build a more robust cybersecurity program in 90 days. I'm joined today by two thought leaders, both from cybersecurity and the IT industries. The first is my colleague, Rob Simopoulos. Hi, Rob.
Hey.
Rob is Defendify's co-founder and brings more than 20 years of experience in the security industry to the table. And together we've invited renowned IT leader Mark Sunday to discuss his experience and explore the common cybersecurity challenges a CIO encounters. Hi, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing great today. Thanks for having me.
So glad you're here. Mr. Sunday brings with him 20 years of experience as CIO and Senior Vice President of Siebel and Oracle, where he was responsible for providing the global communications, computing, and security infrastructure that enabled Oracle's internal business operations, as well as providing a variety of educational services for customers. Previously, he spent 10 years as Vice President of Information Technology at Motorola. I think that was my first phone. And he is currently an advisor and board member of several startups, including here, our very own home of Defendify. So Mark and Rob, I'm so glad you joined us here today and for bringing more than 40 years of experience to this conversation. Everybody in IT departments are so excited to listen to you and hear about this journey. I'm going to turn it over to Rob, but as I do that, I will be sharing a guide that will be referenced throughout the conversation. I also want folks to know if you stay till the end, we'll have an AMA, Ask Me Anything, with Mr. Sunday himself. So you can put your questions in the chat, which I'll save for the end. There's also 5 $100 Amazon gift cards that we're giving away. I will choose a number now, and the 5 people that fall under those 5 numbers will be the winners, if they're still here, of $100 Amazon gift card. So I'll mute myself, monitor the chat. Rob, you have the floor.
Hey, thanks so much, Mark. Nice seeing you. One of my favorite people to talk to. Thanks so much for taking the time out of your day to chat. How you doing?
I'm doing absolutely great today. It's a beautiful day here in Park City, Utah. And one of the things that I just love doing is working with companies like Defendify. I actually have 5 different meetings and calls today with companies, and each one kind of builds on another. It's I'm living my best life of working with a bunch of different startups doing exciting things.
So even though you've retired from Oracle, you're still keeping busy. That's great. I think that's probably a good place for us to start. I'm sure that most of the people who are on the call would love to learn about your journey in becoming the CIO at Oracle. How does someone actually accomplish that in their career? Maybe some people are aspiring to get to that level. Would you mind taking just a couple minutes and sharing that path?
Sure. I went to engineering school at the University of Michigan. And when I graduated in 1976, I had already worked in the IT space with the university and a spinoff from the university. So when I was fresh out at Texas Instruments, I was the only, and TI back in 1976 hired more college engineers than any other company in the United States. But I was the one that had 3 years of experience. And so within 45 days, I found myself being a team leader and, kind of evolved from that. So I've, while Ashley said I have 20 years experience. I've been doing this IT gig since I graduated from high school in 1973. So it's, I'm pushing, I guess it's 50 years.
Yeah.
And during that time, though, it's just been a great opportunity to see how things have evolved. I was in the semiconductor business with ST Microelectronics and Motorola for the first half of my career, and then Oracle and Siebel for the second half. But in the semiconductor business, you really get a lot of rigor around process. There is no manufacturing process more complex than building semiconductors. But I was at a really big company. We're 50,000 people at Motorola Semiconductor, and then I got to move to this relatively small startup, Siebel, but it was tripling in size every year, and got to experience the benefits of being in a much smaller company. And then when Tom Siebel sold his company to his ex-boss, Larry Ellison, he suggested you ought to hire this guy to be in charge of all your technology. And Larry took him up on that. And so the last thing I wanted to do is work for a big company again, but it was just a fabulous experience. So my whole career has been in IT related things. And the last 35, 40 years responsible for everything spanning, operations, applications, and certainly security. So it's been a long journey. And then I stepped away from my day job, and now I split my life in thirds. 1/3 working with startups such as Defendify, 1/3 staying engaged and giving back on the board of both business schools and School of Computing here at the University of Utah, and 1/3 doing amazing adventures.
This is awesome. I think we've got the right person on the call to help us take us on this journey. So Ashley and the team have just posted a PDF that you can download. And the PDF is a guide to get your 90-day cybersecurity journey started. And what we're going to do today is we're going to go through that and hit the high-level items. And then Mark's going to fill in some key aspects of that guide to help give some insight from his side, what he's done, and some thought leadership stuff that's going to help us all. I want to start off with the first 30 days. So if you're an IT individual, whether you're in a new role or whether you are just going on the journey and saying, hey, it's time to get better cybersecurity in place for whatever that catalyst might be, the first 30 days in the guide is outlining that should be around alignment and inventory. And I just want to explain what that means and hit the high level things. So the first part of that is you can't protect what you don't know you have, right? You need to know about everything that's inside of your systems and what you're trying to protect in order to implement a cybersecurity program. And so when we talk about inventorying, we're talking about inventorying your hardware. So knowing all of the computers, the servers, the mobile devices, all of your firewall hardware, anything that you have that's physical, and ensuring that you understand what that is. And if it plugs into the network, having an asset list of that. And that could even include IoT devices too. That could be physical security cameras, access control systems, the whole bit. Another key area to inventory is to understand what kind of software you have. So what kind of software is being implemented? Now that could be on-premise software. It could be software that's installed on computers. It could be SaaS applications that your company is using, but understanding what you have there and inventorying all of that will be really, really important. You're also going to want to understand what your current spend is on a budget. So if you're coming into a new organization and trying to figure out, all right, how much have we spent on cybersecurity? What is the budget? Where is it being deployed? That's a great place to start. And on top of that, understanding what cybersecurity tools are in place and IT tools are in place. So what type of IT tools are being used for patching, remote management? What kind of cybersecurity tools are in place? And then also on the alignment side is, if I'm walking into a new organization, I'm going to want to understand and been tagged into implementing cybersecurity. I'm going to want to understand, why was I hired? Why was I put in this position? Or why was the project of cybersecurity being applied to me? And that basically involves aligning with key stakeholders in the organization. That could be the CIO. It could be because you're working for them. It could be the CEO. It could be the CFO. But one of the parts that's challenging is when someone is trying to work with non-IT leadership. So when you're talking about working with a CEO or a CFO who's maybe not technically up to the same level that you are as an IT leader, that can be challenging sometimes because you're maybe working in technical things and talking about cybersecurity, which can be technical. And it's really hard sometimes to really get aligned and get on the same page on that front. And Mark, I wanted to ask you, because you spent your whole career in an IT role and working in technical aspects of of a business, do you have any tips for the people who are on the webinar today about how can you work with non-IT leadership and sort of get aligned on business goals and especially on the cybersecurity side? Any tips on that front?
It's something that's near and dear to my heart. I think my success in the IT world was not because of my technical prowess, but my ability to build and nurture relationships with key stakeholders, whether it be senior management, peers, or my organization as a whole. So the very first thing I focus on is really understanding the business priorities. What is the company's strategic goals, whether starting with the CEO, CFO, and how do cybersecurity initiatives align with that? Building these relationships is critically important, but a key aspect to that is educate and advocate. Make your CEO, CFO advocates of this. Safra Catz, who's the CEO of Oracle presently, I can remember years ago her saying the single biggest risk to Oracle, the single biggest risk is security. It's the thing that could tarnish our brand for years. It's the thing that could have an impact on our ability to deliver services. And so fortunately, I was at an organization where the CEO itself realized that. But so I think that's not always the case. And so I think it's important to advocate and educate. But then also talk about, the risk. What's the profile of the organization, how risk tolerant they are, and how are people aware of what business risks exist and how cybersecurity fits into that. Rob mentioned he had really comprehensive of kind of the detailed inventory and things you need to do, but getting then the financial alignment with the CFO, how do cybersecurity investments line up with everything else? But to do so, though, it's important to have some clear metrics and goals and then be able to communicate the value. But it all comes down to this is not the role of the security officer. It's not the role of IT. It's everyone's role. There's nothing that's more important that from the CEO down, everyone appreciate that this is a risk, but also a golden opportunity for the entire organization. So being collaborative across the organization, planning around this. And then, kind of lastly, is stay informed and adapt. Understand what's going on. Be prepared to evolve the cybersecurity strategy based on business needs and threats. And lastly, make sure not just within the IT or security organization, but across the entire company, there's governance and accountability. At Oracle, one of the things that we did, we had a security advisory council where every organization from HR, marketing, certainly IT, engineering, all came together where we clearly talked about what are our threats, opportunities, and risks across security. I mean, that's really how important it needs to be at every organization.
Mark, you talked about budgets, like and ensuring you're doing that right. And I'm sure your budget at Oracle was probably enormous. What are any tips or ideas, or can you share some thoughts around how an IT leader should go about reviewing their budget when they're reviewing like the tools that they have and perhaps the consultants that they're working with, or their team and so on? Any tips and tricks that you can share on how to approach a budget?
Absolutely. First of all, I do is assess the current spending. Review current cybersecurity expenditures, compare them against the budget, identify anything or unexpected costs. Then really important, I try to mention that before, is align with business objectives. How does your cybersecurity budget align with the company's strategic risks and goals? And then start looking at what you're doing. What's the cost benefit analysis of where are we making investments and are we getting a return on those investments? But another thing that's important to do is benchmarking. How do we stand up against other organizations within our industry? But one of the things that's really cool about IT is we share spanning most every industry. We have more in common than are different. How do we stand up with other organizations our size or in kind of in the domain of which we work? And so benchmarking is key. But also you have to look at your suppliers, your vendors. So first, inventory them and evaluating, are they meeting your expectations? Review your contracts. Do you have favorable terms and conditions? And really do a cost analysis of, so much is changing. And then with so many of these services being SaaS oriented, your ability to change is so much quicker. And not only for your suppliers that are doing products, but also your consultants. Who are all the consultants you have, assess how they're doing, evaluate them against, others that could be providing those services for you as in total. So bottom line is, review where you stand with your stakeholders, identify redundancies, make sure you're aligned strategically with the goals of the organization, and be good at being able to report and document where you're spending the money and how it's being spent.
So the first phase here, we've aligned with the key stakeholders. We've inventoried everything. We know what we have. We reviewed our vendors, our consultants. We have a good picture, clear picture of the organization's posture and those things that are there. So the second phase that we have listed in the guide is we're talking about assessing. So assessing all of these things that we've reviewed here. So the first thing is assessing the current cybersecurity posture of the organization. And just to share, the way that we're seeing that happening quite often is with organizations basically doing a control questionnaire or mapping themselves against some form of cybersecurity framework like NIST or Center for Internet Security. If they're under compliance, it could be a DoD version of 800-171 and so on. But basically going through all of those controls and mapping to them all the controls that they have in place to protect their organization and seeing where they stand. So as an example here in Defendify, we have a cybersecurity assessment tool that someone can go through and scores and grades them. So getting an assessment of the cybersecurity posture. The next part of assessing is I would recommend reviewing like security plans. So looking at policies and incident response plans, and even on the privacy side, if that's part of your role too, is really understanding what those policies look like, understanding if they need refreshes, if you're missing policies and whether they need to be put into place. That would be really key. And also assessing current cybersecurity testing results. So assessments and testing results. So if the organization that you've walked into, or in your organization, if you've performed vulnerability scanning, vulnerability management, if you've done penetration testing, if you've done anything like that, that's producing reports that are showing vulnerabilities in the organization or potential vulnerabilities, I'd highly recommend, if I was new into an organization, to be reviewing those and understanding where that all stands. And so, Mark, I'm going to pass it over to you and ask you the question of, like, in the past, I'm sure you've done tons of assessments at the organizations that you've worked at. How did you approach that?
Yeah, so there went through a number of key steps. The first one is review the cybersecurity strategy and governance, excuse me. Is there strategic alignment? Does our cybersecurity strategy align with the overall business objectives? And verify that we have a clear roadmap for achieving those goals. Then also, you mentioned this, Rob, what is our governance framework, including policies, procedures, and standards, and ensure that there's executive oversight, not just within security, not just within IT, but across the organization. Secondly, assess the policies and procedures. What policies are relevant and how effective are they? Do they reflect our current threats and regulatory requirements? And then evaluate our procedures. How effective are we actually executing against these, and identify any gaps or inconsistencies? The third thing I'd suggest is evaluate risk management processes. Do a risk assessment, conduct a comprehensive risk assessment of identify potential threats and vulnerabilities, prioritize the risk based on their impact, and then make sure that there's effective mitigation strategies for dealing with these. Ensure that the plans are actually identifying the risks and identify gaps and overlaps. The fourth one, you kind of alluded to this as well, is it's one thing to prevent, it's another thing to detect, but then what's the incident response and recovery? So what's the response plan that affects across the organization, which includes communication and being able to recover from the incidents, and really assess, via a number of different things, including running some scenarios, is how does it actually work? The fifth thing I think about is assessing cybersecurity tools and technologies. Rob kicked this thing off about assessing what your tools and technologies are, but make sure that as part of that assessment, we identify what the gaps and potential overlaps are. But it all really comes down and starts with the team. What is the skills that their teams has, and how are resources allocated? And then how's that tie in with any audit requirements we have, both internal and external? And then lastly, spanning the entire organization, what is the level of awareness and what kind of employee training do we have to make people aware, understand, aware, and take accountability for their responsibility? And then it all comes down to evaluating the metrics and reporting, letting the whole organization know how the organization you're working with is standing up and how it compares to others.
That's great. And just to remind everybody, if you have any questions, please put them in the question. Where is it, Ashley? Top right corner?
The chat is going wild. There's a ton of questions. People do seem to be finding it. It's on the right.
All right, great. And so we're going to have lots of time at the end here to do an AMA. I think I'm going to call it Ask Mark Anything, and ask him any questions that he has, whether it's about his career or anything to do with what we're talking about here today. I think we've gone through phase one, talking about alignment and inventorying all the things, so you know what you have, and then assessing the posture of the organization using cybersecurity controls, reviewing your cybersecurity controls, reviewing all your policies and plans, and so on. Again, the guide is available here in the webinar if you want to download it and get the more details on that. I think that takes us into the final stage here, not the final stage of your cybersecurity program, because that's always ongoing, but this final stage of your 90-day journey and getting your cybersecurity up and running. And that's basically the phase of plan, budget, and then implement. So we look back at phase 1 and 2, and then the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to understand what our plan is in order to get things into a better posture. So where do we want to make investments? How do we want to go about it, and why? And we're going to prepare detailed budgets. And that's not just a technology budget. The one thing that I think we wanted to really enforce here is that it's really important to include a training for your IT team and ensure that they're getting trained on cybersecurity and other aspects as well. And I would recommend highly that anytime you're trying to present a budget to anybody or explaining, especially to non-technical IT folks or non-technical decision makers, is explaining to them why. So you can go back and look at your assessments and your inventory and understand where the gaps might be and the things that you need, but really trying to keep it really simplified and not too technical so that you can get buy-in from non-IT leadership in regarding doing that. Now, that's, I think, a great question for wanting to pose at you, Mark, is like when you're speaking to a CFO or someone who's not necessarily technical or at the level of technical skill sets that you're at, and you understand that they don't really understand what vulnerability scanning necessarily is, or managed detection and response, or all these tools that are really necessary for an organization today. How do you approach that conversation to get approval on a budget and really explain to them why and how you need to get this budget in place to protect an organization?
Well, I think it starts off with something that I'm near dear to my heart, is understand your audience. Beginning with every conversation, every email, every presentation, you got to be aware of where your audience is. Most CFOs are not familiar with the technical jargon. What they want to do is focus on business impact and the financial aspects, and see that when you talk about security and cybersecurity, that it's always aligned with the business goals. But another thing you need to do, and I'm a big person for analogies, is simplify the technical concepts. Can you make something that in our realm is incredibly complex, but via analogy, it allows others to appreciate it. And then I think kind of another point is highlight really what are the risks that we have and what's the potential impact. Use real world examples of cybersecurity incidents and their financial repercussions. And of course, CFOs are big on ROI. What's the return on investment? What can this do in terms of cost savings, risk reduction, and compliance? And that's one of the things that I like to focus on, is how do we show that investments that we're making in cybersecurity are helping us improve our overall cost across the entire organization because we're improving productivity, quality, and the work that gets done. But you got to be able to break down the budget, present the budget in clear categories. I like to think of prevention, detection, response, and recovery, and provide a brief explanation, justification for each one. And, how effective one communicates is important in everything you do, whether you incorporate graphs, charts, infographics, do something to help visually represent the investments that you're making and provide metrics and benchmarks. How do we stand up and how are we performing? You can also leverage third parties, insights from independent reports or analyst firms to validate our budget requests. This is how we stand up, and here's credibility. Here's an outside view of that. Things that are really important that I think often lose sight of, and kind of my mission when I was at Oracle was, I think one of the executives early on is keep us out of jail. So highlight compliance and legal requirements and show how the budget address regulatory and compliance requirements. But also, everything's a journey. So present a roadmap. What are the steps that you're going to take along the way, and how will the budget be allocated over time? And really prepare yourself for questions. Anticipate questions and objections a CFO might have, and have a clear, concise responses. Be ready to explain any specific investments that are necessary and how they align with the company's financial objective. And finally, summarize everything, pulling together, emphasizing the critical need for the budget, and what are the elements that are really going to have an impact on the company's business goals, not just focused on what it's going to cost.
Mark, how do you approach training your internal team? So you've had large teams that worked for you. So it's interesting. Some team members are really want to get trained, and they're like constantly asking for more training. How do I get that done? Others are not so inclined to want to go after that, but that it's important that they do get trained, and they should actually be taking that training. How do you approach that from like a management perspective, but also from a budgeting perspective?
Well, I'm really big on starting with where people are at. I mentioned in my previous little discussion, know your audience. So the first thing I do is assess the current skills and gaps. See where the organization is, but also see individuals. Where are the knowledge, skills, and where are the gaps that need to be addressed? And then align the training not only with filling those gaps, but aligned with the business goals. And prioritize the training that directly supports the business goals and key risk areas. Again, focus on the key areas. Prioritize training in areas that are critical to the organization's cybersecurity posture, and recommend training in emerging technologies and threats such as AI and machine learning. Ensure that organizationally and then at the individual level, you have a detailed training plan and how you mix in different modalities, whether it's formal training, certifications, hands-on exercises, and ensure that there's ongoing education. And certifications and so forth can actually be very, very valuable. I used to kind of write them off, but as I got more and more into it, I thought this is really providing a broad education. But another thing is not all individuals are the same, and it really helps to use the diversity across your training methods. And don't hesitate using external partners and other experts. But the key thing that I like to do is promote continuous learning, that every person in the organization, not just in the IT or security organization, but it's a continuous learning, it's a journey, but you're going to have to budget for it, and you're going to have to measure your overall training effectiveness. At Oracle, we had mandatory training that all 35,000 developers were, required to take on a regular basis. Secure programming practices and things along that line. But we also had other mandatory training around various threats and risks and things that was put in place and done such a well that, first of all, we ensured that the people were successfully in taking it. You couldn't just click the button, but also that it really highlighted stuff that was relevant to how it impact their specific job. And then lastly, you got to go across all the different things, whether it's how cloud changes, application security, how authentication, data privacy compliance, all the different aspects that touch employees across the organization.
Got it. So this phase 3 that we just went through, we were talking about plan, budget, implement. And one of the things, as a CEO of a company, and we have lots of initiatives and programs and things going on here at Defendify as an example, I think that once programs get launched and they're running, as a business leader, you want to hear about how things are progressing, so you want to get these regular updates and you want to learn more about, the budget that's being spent. Is it being successful, and the KPIs and stuff around that. I want to understand, I know you've done some major implementations in your previous career, and you've told me some amazing stories around that too, but how do you communicate progress and development of a program? So if someone was going to implement a new cybersecurity program, how should they be constantly updating, the rest of the stakeholders and keeping them up to speed as to how that's progressing?
Well, once again, I mentioned at Oracle, we had the corporate security advisory council, or actually it wasn't advisory, it was like do real work, but it included members from every organization that in any form or fashion touched some sort of our threat surface. Matter of fact, one of the, we've got hundreds of stories, but just to give you an example, at Oracle, we threw this, huge open world conference with 60, 70,000 live attendees. And we ended up getting a threat from our registration provider that then through a backdoor opened access into our network. And then because the way the thing worked, we combined the network all the way to Oracle so we could pull in demos and so forth. So, it really highlighted the need that some department doing a relatively innocuous thing of doing registration for a conference created a huge exposure for our organization. So, I think it starts off with cybersecurity should be brought up to the company-wide level, and then, walk through, okay, where are the threats and how are we making progress? So the things that we would review is not only over a period of time, let's say we met every 6 months, we would review. By the way, one thing that made it, I think, increasingly relevant, we didn't talk just about cybersecurity. We also talked about physical security and other aspects as well. What are all the exposures we have? But as part of that, we then said, okay, what happened over the last period? What remediations do we need to put in place? What are other programs? Where are we at against those things? And I found that very valuable because it was organization company wide. And as part of that, just one metrics that had to be presented is where do we stack up with the education within each organization? Have all the engineers, for example, taken the secure coding practices and other things that they have to do within their realm. Likewise, in marketing and others. And then tied into that, though, was everything new that we implemented. While it was a painful process, but anyone touching anything that could have any security implications had to go through a security review process. So building in, one of the messages that you're hearing me say time and time again is security and data privacy compliance is everyone's responsibility. So engaging everyone throughout the whole process, having them report where they are and what actions are and what's happened, what are the remediations, and have an ongoing plan. So, if I have anything to communicate is that across the entire organization, they need to understand how critical the security space is. They need to know that every organization, every employee is responsible, need to assess what's happened, what's going to be done going forward, and see that there's a plan to move the organization to align cybersecurity with its overall business goals and priorities.
Yeah, I think it's spot on. I think today cybersecurity is a business practice more than necessarily an IT practice. and that, it is part of the entire organization. We're here at Defendify, we're in what we call EOS company. So an entrepreneurial operating system is what we utilize in order to run the business. So we do state of the companies and quarterly meetings and same page meetings. It's a great framework to run a business on. And I can see an organization who's having like a state of the company where the whole company's coming together is if you're the CEO and you're on this call, you should consider, putting the person who's leading your cybersecurity practice, put them up there to present how the program's been running. How is it performing? How are we doing? Are we seeing improvements in, the training and awareness in the organization? You can make a real tremendous difference there.
And what has occurred? What incidents have we had? How do we respond to them? Right. What are we doing to prevent them from reoccurring? And then, but other things like doing testing, sending out phishing emails and seeing what the response rate is to those. And, again, cybersecurity is an entire organization's responsibility, and everyone needs to be engaged in not only preventing, but also being part of the process moving forward.
Yeah, if you're an IT leader on here, and I would highly recommend, ask the CEO if you can have, if you could take a little bit of time and share with everybody how it's going. There are some of our customers who are doing a really wonderful job with that, and they're really gamifying the cybersecurity program, especially the awareness side. So giving away prizes for the best defender and who watched the videos and so on, and having like different departments competing against each other. So you can have some fun with it. Mark, where I wanted to go next was talking about one of the things that I think you're the most passionate about, and it's nothing necessarily about our 90-day plan here that people are reviewing, but I wanted to talk about AI since I have you on the call, and talk about where AI security is at. We know a lot of companies today are using LLMs and so on, and I wanted to just hear if you could give us a brain dump from your side as to what your thoughts are and what organizations who are on this call should be thinking about around AI and security.
AI, while I think it is the most transformational technology in my 50 years of working with tech that we've ever experienced, it also provides, the opportunity for most issues, concerns, and so forth. My son, who's a senior and doing an internship this summer at Korn Ferry, he was given a few different assignments, but one of them, as I talked more and more about him, is incredibly interesting, compelling, something that every organization should do. He, by the end of his internship this summer, is to present to Korn Ferry senior executives what are the new issues, concerns, and risks that result from the implementation of AI. And so I hadn't really given it as much consideration until he's actually going through this. And one of the things that I realized is, for example, around data privacy. If you take 5, 10 independent pieces of information, but AI can process so much of it, you now have exposure relative to, I can identify Rob's mental health, I can identify his physical condition, I can identify other personal things I really shouldn't be doing. There's all sorts of things around, and this is happening across the organization. Their application of AI can put in, whether it's other compliance things around bias and so forth, but it can create, significant security threats. And so, but we talked about legal and regulatory. Well, a bunch of laws and regulations have been put in place, and many, many more are in the process of being put in place. And one of the things that we often look towards is our security organization to ensure that we're doing what needs to be done from a compliance standpoint, particularly around things in the security space. AI is just dramatically increasing that. But also AI is really dramatically expanding our threat surface. It is so easy now to, you've all seen the deep fakes and so forth, to make attempts to garner information out of the organization so much easier. And then interestingly enough, on my call over the last hour, it's with a company that I work with. It's an AI-based company, and what they do is garner insights. And we talked about, while all the data that the company takes and pulls together, leveraging AI to develop these insights, the insights themselves are more valuable than the data. So while you may have a focus around securing, the data records, whether they be transactional or personal or what have you, what actually could be at higher risk, but not considered as much, is all the new type of data, which is these categories of insights that AI is generating. So AI, I think, offers unlimited opportunity for every organization within every department or function within an organization. It also provides great new opportunities for new exposure relative to risk, ethics, compliance, and so forth.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. All right, so we've come to the end of me asking questions of Mark, and it looks like there's a lot of questions, Ashley, that are being posted from the people who are attending the webinar. So I'm going to hand it over to you, and let's do the Ask Mark Anything phase here and allow anyone. So put them up here and hit us with the questions.
So there's about 46 different questions. Some of them have a lot to do with deepfakes and AIs. I know you were just talking about that, but there are a few questions I want you to elaborate a little bit. One was asking specifically, how much should IT professionals be focused on learning all the intricacies of that versus having something that can monitor that for them?
I think I'm unaware just how sophisticated the tool set has gotten to be around being able to identify, fakes or, things that are created by AI, but that's got to be in our toolkit, is to, be able to identify. Part of it right now has to come down to education. Make all of our employees aware of this stuff can look, completely genuine and authentic and so forth. But so it begins with that. But I definitely think that there needs to be a focus on having appropriate tool set and so forth in place that can help, identify these things and help us mitigate them. It's an incredible security concern. And I'm not certain that matter of fact, I'm confident that the solutions in this space are not keeping pace with the threats. So it's something that, all of us have seen those deep fake emails and stuff. It certainly looks compelling when I get a letter from an email from USPS that I have a package, but they can't deliver it and they need some information, or from the IRS about or Social Security Department. It's amazing how good these things are gotten. And it's just another thing that we have to look at our new threat surfaces that are far more sophisticated than a lot of things that we've seen before. And there's that form, AI certainly has an impact relative to, deep fakes and so forth, but the other kinds of things that they can do well beyond that of, being able to attack with the ability to process quantities of information that we've never seen before can help with new intrusions and that other sorts of things that we, quite frankly, no one had the scale to be able to deal with it. So the risk of AI by things that our employees are doing that might be unaware of, or that folks that are trying to obtain our information is tremendous. And so it's got to be on your list. And by the way, when I would go talk to CFOs and CEOs and so forth, or stakeholders in general, I'd have some hypotheticals of these are the kinds of things that companies such as ours are experiencing that have just escalated as a result of them leveraging AI.
That's awesome. Thank you. There's a lot of questions also on cyber resilience and a holistic approach to cybersecurity. So, one question in particular says, what is your opinion on the key pillars of cyber resilience, and how can organizations cultivate a culture of resilience in the face of evolving threats?
Well, I talked about it before when I used to think about cybersecurity within my realm at Oracle. First thing was detection. What are the lines of defense that we're putting in place? We would get thousands and thousands of attacks every single day. So what is our ability to prevent those? But then the next thing that we actually had good measurements around is detection. How quickly we were able to detect where we were violated. And then another thing that we also had pretty active metrics on as well is, okay, once we detected, what's our time to remediate? And so I think when I think of, kind of robustness, across the resilience, I think was the term. Resilience deals with, the prevention, the detection, and the remediation. That all three need to be critical pillars to your cybersecurity strategy.
I love that. Thank you so much. Can I ask one more?
Of course.
All right, maybe two more. And for folks who are looking at the time, if we don't get to your question or it's very Defendify specific to you, we'll make sure to follow up via email within the next 24 hours. There's 46 questions on the docket right now, so I am trying to bunch them together, but we're not going to leave you hanging, and we're happy to give you the answers to the questions via email quickly, right away, of course. Mark, the next question is about third-party vendors. We've had several questions about supply chain partners and how they often present cybersecurity risks. Are there steps that you would recommend an organization takes to both assess and manage third-party risk effectively?
Well, that was a huge consideration, in my roles, and it got even more so in the last decade or so. So I mentioned earlier at Oracle, every new capability coming into any part of the organization, there was a security assessment. And so having a independent team was actually separate. It was a corporate function rolled up to the CTO of the company, would be responsible for reviewing and assessing every new tool and technology. Of course, it comes in from the standpoint of following ISO and other kinds of guidelines along that line. But we'd also do some, where appropriate, rigorous testing. I mean, that's hard for a medium-sized company to have the wherewithal. So one of the things you need to do is rely on what independent assessments has the third party provided and what can they demonstrate. And another thing I wouldn't hesitate to do is reference checking, not just references directly provided, but I'd put a little bit extra effort in and try to find others who have been leveraging these third parties, whether they be consultative or in the product and tool space, and try to look for kind of more the negative feedback on them. But any new connection that you make, whether it's from a service or consultancy down your supply chain or tools and products, you need to look at that as a new threat surface. And a lot of times, though, this is one of the things that I thought that Mark Hurd, when he was CEO of Oracle, had said that this was a handful of years ago. And one of the, relatively sizable company was saying, well, if I turn over our the IT stuff we're doing, I think it was transitioning maybe to leveraging cloud services. How can I be ensured that you do it as well as we did? And Mark's response was, we can't be that bad. Any given organization can't be as good. It can't have the scale of resources and tools and analysis that a large scale provider like Amazon, Azure, Google, Oracle, and so forth can provide relative to this. So one of the things that I like to think of on most everything is stand on the shoulder of others. So at some point, bringing in, various third parties along your supply chain and stuff can expose new risks, and certainly you need to assess that. But on the other hand, a lot of these providers can do a way better job than any given organization could do on their own. They have way more resources that are highly specialized in those areas. And so you shouldn't hesitate taking advantage of them with of course, validating that they are not providing any new exposure for you.
I just want to add in there to keep following Defendify. We have an upcoming webinar. I don't think it's been announced yet, but we're going to be interviewing an individual who works at a very large company who is actually part of the third-party vendor team. So they actually do the third-party assessments. They'll be coming up in the next 2 months, but they'll be coming up pretty shortly. Back to you, Ashley.
Rob, you can't hold any secrets. You're not allowed to have any secrets if you're telling everybody how exciting we are coming up in the future. Mark, I have a question that I'm actually combining two into one. What methodologies are you using to assign risk values to different assets? And then how do you use that to communicate the return on investment to maybe non-IT leaders when you're kind of talking about, we need more cybersecurity?
Okay, so it's been a handful of years before I was, years ago when I was directly involved with that. And then I had quite an extensive, elaborate team. But bottom line is, we would look at what is at biggest exposure, across our company. When you think of a company like Oracle, it's starts off with your products, and this is probably true with most. What IP do you have, and where's that IP exposed? So we would look at not only the nature of the IP, but where was it? For example, we saw huge risk in China. So the level of encryption and the compartmentalization we had of data was far greater there, and then in some other places as well where we thought our IP was exposed. We'd also then assess other areas where it's PII related. And so we had a whole checklist of stuff that was across the company. What are our most critical assets? Certainly IP, PII, and then HIPAA. As Oracle has really been expanding in the healthcare space, what are all those things along that line? So we'd go through the various natures of all the different data, and then we'd go through and assess where are we at and what are the things that we need to do. And again, always looking at it from those three pillars of prevent, detect, and remediate as part of our overall risk assessment plan. And again, reviewing on a really regular basis, what is our threat surface and what progress have we made against it was integral to our daily operating procedure.
That's awesome. We have a lot more questions on zero trust architecture. So it says the concept of zero trust architecture has gained traction as a security model that challenges the traditional parameter-based approach. How can organizations transition towards zero trust architecture, and what are the key components in a successful zero trust strategy?
Well, I'm not an expert on that, but that's definitely our whole thought process for my entire tenure at Oracle. By just defending our perimeter, which included at that time probably close to 1 million computing assets, and just putting this giant perimeter around it, we felt our greatest exposure was within the perimeter. So everything we did had to be thought of as, from the ground up, had to be zero trust. So, that's obviously done with, again, I'm not an expert in the space, but the compartmentalization, being able to identify and restrict not only categories of data and applications and so forth, but also compartmentalization of those who have access to it. And then put in place, belt and suspenders aspects around how we're going to protect it. How can we ensure that whether it be a technology or a human failure, that we're able to detect, prevent, and remediate. But also when you have 140,000 employees, you have to assume that there's bad actors internally as well. And so you have, as part of our zero trust, it goes all the way down to, literally the employee level. What can we do that minimizes our risks, but at the same time doesn't take away from productivity and collaboration? So I think it's almost ridiculous to have any other mindset towards security than zero trust. And I think that needs to be an important aspect. We talked about talking to CEOs and CFOs. They probably, just think around the fence around the property, but really have to start internalizing that a lot of our biggest threats are inadvertent or, directly hostile activities by people within our perimeter.
Mark, we're getting pretty close to the end of the webinar. The questions have been great from the group. And I noticed that some of the questions were specifically about Defendify. So I'd encourage people to come in, and Ashley will follow up with them and make sure that they get their answers there. But Mark, I wanted to give you, maybe 2 minutes just to see if there's anything else that you want to share with everyone here. Any thoughts that are, bouncing around your head that you think would be beneficial. And then Ashley will turn to you and have you do the draw for the prizes. How does that sound? Mark, any final thoughts for the group here?
Absolutely. So security throughout my career has been one of those things that it doesn't innately get all the pizzazz of implementing a new capability, whether it helps you enhance revenue or reduce cost, because it's almost in some ways reviewed as an insurance policy. And so it's really important to be able to share that cybersecurity is integral to, really everything going on within the organization. And doing this well can actually be a differentiator. In fact, we talked about evaluating third parties, thinking of your organization as one of these third parties that you can help reduce risk and improve security by providing whatever product or services that you provide. This is, an incredibly important area, but it's changing faster than maybe any other area within the business. And so I'd highly recommend, making it everyone's business and, doing what you can to make it core to the business and tied in with business goals. But but one last thing I want to mention is, again, I talked about this at the beginning and want to swing back to it. When I was at Oracle, I had hundreds of people with literally hundreds of providers of service and tools. And, mid-sized companies simply don't have the wherewithal to do all that. So being able to go to an organization such as Defendify that kind of puts a wrapper around everything from assessing, educating, all the way through the tools you need to do to help reduce, security and help you remediate those, I think is just really an excellent approach than trying to, go a tool at a time. So I commend Defendify on its mission of bringing large-scale, security to mid-sized companies.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. You're always one of my favorite people to chat with, and I appreciate you taking your time out of your day today to chat with everyone who's here. Ashley, over to you. Why don't you do the draw?
I know you let me do the fun stuff. I appreciate it every day, Rob. All right. I'll use usernames, not full email addresses, but CAYLCAULK is the first, number 22, CAYLCAULK. We'll follow up on email for all these folks. Number 33, Dazzlin Victor, DAZZLIN Victor. Winner number 2. Winner number 3 is Emil or Emil, EMILESONIA. And winner number 4, Mason J, MASONJAY. And winner number 5, V Moore, VMOORE. We'll be following up with all of you via email.
Thanks, Mark.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Ashley.
And by the way, I'm easily accessible via LinkedIn. Mark Sunday. There's probably not a whole lot of us, but then just put Oracle. And if anyone would like to ask me something directly, I'd be happy to have you in my network. And don't hesitate to reach out.
Awesome.
That's so generous. Thank you so much. It was great to be here with both of you today. And all of you at home, really, thank you so much for coming. All right. See you soon.